There's a shift that happens inside you. You feel it first in your chest, a loosening, like something that was clenched finally lets go. You don't announce it, you don't post about it, but people notice. They treat you differently. Opportunities appear without force. Conversations feel easier. It's as if reality itself recalibrates. Carl Jung spent decades studying this phenomenon. He watched it unfold in his patients, in spiritual traditions, in myths across cultures. And he identified something most modern psychology refuses to acknowledge. When you master the energy most people waste on lust, you don't just improve yourself, you fundamentally alter how the world responds to you. This isn't about suppression. It's not about shame or religious guilt. Jung was clear. Denying your nature creates shadow, but transforming it, that creates power, real power, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself. Most people never experience this shift. They spend their entire lives pulled by invisible strings, reacting, seeking, consuming, never stopping to ask, what if all this energy I'm scattering could be gathered? What if desire itself is just raw fuel, and I've been burning it carelessly when I could be building something? Jung called this process transmutation. Alchemists spent centuries creating symbols for it. Religious mystics described it in veiled language. But the core truth remains simple. The energy behind lust is the same energy behind creation, ambition, insight, and presence. The question isn't whether you have it. The question is, are you leaking it or are you wielding it? When you rise above lust, 5 unmistakable changes occur. They're not gradual, they're not subtle, and according to Jung, they signal something ancient awakening inside you, something he called the integrated self. Let's go through them. You've met someone like this before. They walk into a room, and without saying a word, attention shifts toward them. Not because they're loud, not because they're performing. There's just something, a weight, a clarity. Jung noticed this in people who had successfully integrated their sexual energy. He described it as a kind of psychic coherence. Most people radiate scattered frequencies, desire pulling one way, anxiety pulling another, identity fracturing across a dozen impulses. But someone who has transmuted lust, they emanate from a single center. Here's what happens internally. When you're constantly leaking energy through lust, whether through fantasies, compulsive consumption, or validation seeking, you're literally fragmenting your attention. Your mind is divided. Part of you is here. Part of you is chasing the next hit of stimulation. You're not fully present anywhere. But when you reclaim that energy, something strange occurs. Your mental chatter decreases. The constant background noise of craving quiets down, and suddenly you're just here, fully, completely. People feel that. They can't always name it, but they sense it. You become someone who doesn't need anything from them. And paradoxically, that makes them want to give more. Your relationships deepen. Your conversations become more meaningful, not because you're trying harder, because you're finally not trying to extract something hidden beneath every interaction. Jung observed this in his own life. After his break with Freud, he went through what he called his confrontation with the unconscious, a period of intense inner work where he stopped projecting his desires outward and started integrating them inward. His journals from this time describe a growing sense of solidity, of being rooted in something timeless. And here's the paradox. The less you need validation, the more you receive it. The less you chase, the more comes to you. Not because the universe rewards virtue, but because you've stopped broadcasting desperation. You've stopped leaking the very energy that attracts what you want. This is the first unmistakable sign. People treat you differently, and you didn't change your behavior. You changed your frequency. Lust operates on a specific timeline, now, not tomorrow, not in an hour, now. It hijacks your sense of time, collapsing everything into urgent craving. You feel it in your body, the restlessness, the itching need to act, to consume, to satisfy. And beneath that urgency lives anxiety, because when you're controlled by lust, you're controlled by lack, and lack breeds fear. Jung understood this deeply. He wrote extensively about how neurosis, chronic anxiety, compulsive behavior, identity fragmentation stems from unintegrated libido. And by libido, he didn't just mean sexual energy. He meant life force, the raw drive that animates you. When that energy is scattered through lust, it creates what he called temporal compression. You live in a contracted state. Everything feels urgent. You're constantly behind. Your mind races ahead to the next thing, the next fix, the next distraction. You're never settled in the present. But when you rise above lust, when you transmute that energy, time itself seems to slow down. You'll notice it first in small moments. You're sitting with coffee, and instead of scrolling, you're just there, tasting it, feeling the warmth. The moment stretches. It has texture. Or you're in conversation, and you're not mentally rehearsing your next line. You're listening, deeply, and because you're not rushing to respond, your responses become sharper, more intuitive. Jung experienced this during his years of active imagination work. He would sit with images from his unconscious, not rushing to interpret them, not forcing meaning, just observing. And in that patient observation, he found that anxiety dissolved. Not because the anxiety was reasoned away, but because the energetic pattern creating it had been transformed. Here's what's happening. Anxiety is what lust becomes when it's unfulfilled. Its desire turned inward, eating itself. But when you redirect that energy toward creation, toward presence, toward integration, the anxiety has nothing to feed on. It starves. And in its place, a deep, unshakable calm. Not the calm of someone who's given up, the calm of someone who's no longer at war with themselves. Time expands because you're no longer collapsing it with craving. And when time expands, life becomes richer. You notice more, you feel more, you create more. This is the second sign. The frantic pace of your inner life slows down, and you find yourself effortlessly present. Most people don't have a vision. They have a collection of fantasies they revisit when reality gets boring. There's a difference. A fantasy keeps you comfortable. It's a mental escape hatch. A vision pulls you forward. It demands something from you. Jung saw this pattern repeatedly. People dominated by lust live in fantasy. They dream about what they'd do, if only. But they never actually do it. Why? Because the same energy required to build a vision is being drained into endless cycles of craving and release. When you rise above lust, something clarifies. It's like wiping fog off a mirror. Suddenly, you can see what you actually want. Not what you've been told to want, not what gets likes or approval, what you want. And more importantly, you see the path. Jung described this as the activation of the transcendent function, the psyche's ability to hold tension between opposites and synthesize something new. When you're scattered by lust, you can't hold tension. You need immediate release. But when you've integrated that energy, you can hold ambiguity. You can sit with discomfort. And in that space, clarity emerges. Here's what this looks like practically. You stop half-starting projects. You stop dabbling. You choose a direction and you move. Not because you're forcing yourself, because it feels inevitable, like water flowing downhill. Your goals stop feeling like obligations and start feeling like expressions. You're not trying to prove something anymore. You're building because the energy inside you demands an outlet, and creating is the most honest outlet there is. Jung himself embodied this. After transmuting his own inner chaos during his midlife crisis, he produced some of his most profound work, books, theories, frameworks that still shape psychology today. That wasn't discipline. That was redirected energy finding its true form. And here's the invisible benefit. When you're aligned with a clear vision, you stop wasting time on distractions. You become ruthlessly efficient, not through force, but through focus. Your energy isn't scattered, it's concentrated, and concentrated energy moves mountains. This is the third sign. You suddenly know exactly what you're building, and distractions lose their grip. This is where most people get stuck. They try to rise above lust through suppression, through willpower, through shame. And Jung would say, you've just made it worse, because when you suppress desire, you don't eliminate it. You send it underground. It becomes shadow, the parts of yourself you refuse to acknowledge. And the shadow doesn't disappear. It sabotages. It leaks out sideways. It controls you from beneath conscious awareness. Jung's entire approach was different. He said, don't fight the shadow, integrate it. That means facing the parts of you that crave, that hunger, that want things you've been taught are wrong or shameful. Not indulging them blindly, but not denying them either. Seeing them, understanding them, and then, this is key, transforming them. When you rise above lust in the Jungian sense, you're not becoming a monk. You're becoming whole. You're taking the raw, primal energy of desire and channeling it into something conscious, something purposeful. Here's what integration feels like. You stop being shocked by your own thoughts. You stop feeling like a bad person for having certain impulses. You recognize them as energy, not identity. And once you see them as energy, you can direct them. People who've done this work have a distinct quality. They're not squeaky clean. They're not performing purity. But there's no contradiction in them, no hidden guilt, no secret shame eating them from the inside. Jung called this individuation, becoming a unified self, and he was clear. You can't individuate without integrating your sexual energy. It's too fundamental, too powerful. If you leave it in shadow, it drags you backward no matter how much you grow in other areas. Shadow integration also changes how you relate to others. You stop projecting. You stop seeing people as objects of desire or obstacles to avoid. You see them as they are, complex, flawed, whole. And that clear seeing is rare. Most people are so busy managing their projections they never actually meet another person. But you're present, you're honest, and people feel safe around you because they sense you're not hiding from yourself, which means you won't demand they hide either. This is the fourth sign. You stop fighting yourself, and the war inside you ends. This is the one that sounds mystical, the one people dismiss. But Jung documented it obsessively. He called it synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that seem to align with your inner state. And he noticed people who had integrated their sexual energy experienced synchronicity more frequently. Why? Because when your energy is scattered through lust, you're vibrating at a fragmented frequency. You're sending mixed signals into the world. Want and shame, desire and regret, ambition and self-sabotage. The universe, or reality, or the collective unconscious, or whatever framework you prefer, can't respond coherently to incoherence. But when you've transmuted lust into purpose, you're vibrating from a unified center. Your thoughts, emotions, and actions align. You're no longer contradicting yourself energetically, and reality reflects that clarity. You'll notice it in small ways first. You think of someone, they call. You need information, it appears. You take a step toward your vision, an unexpected door opens. Jung didn't attribute this to magic. He attributed it to the psyche's deep connection with the world. He believed that, at a certain level, the boundary between self and environment dissolves. When you're integrated, you're tapped into patterns larger than your individual ego, and those patterns guide you. Practically, this means your intuition sharpens. You make better decisions without overthinking. You trust hunches that turn out to be accurate. You stop forcing outcomes and start flowing with what wants to happen. This isn't passive. You're still acting, still creating, but you're doing it in partnership with something larger. Jung called this active imagination meets outer reality. The inner and outer worlds begin to mirror each other. And here's the shift people feel but can't name. When you're in this state, it's like the world is working with you, not against you. Obstacles still appear, but they feel like tests, not punishments. Challenges still arise, but they come with hidden lessons that move you forward. This is the fifth sign. Life starts feeling less like a struggle and more like a dance. Not because it got easier, but because you're finally moving with the rhythm instead of fighting it. Let's be honest. Most people will never do this work. Not because they can't, because it requires something modern culture has trained us to avoid: delayed gratification on a profound level. Rising above lust means giving up the quick hit, the easy escape, the numbing scroll, the instant dopamine. It means sitting with discomfort long enough for it to transform. And most people would rather stay comfortable in their chaos than endure the discomfort of change. Jung knew this. He wrote about the resistance to individuation, how the psyche itself sometimes fights wholeness, because wholeness demands responsibility. When you're fragmented, you can blame circumstances, blame others, blame bad luck. But when you're integrated, you're accountable. You're the author. And that's terrifying. But here's what Jung also knew. The people who do this work, who rise above lust and integrate their energy, become something rare. They become pillars, sources of stability in a world obsessed with instant everything. They become the ones others turn to when life gets real. This isn't about perfection. Jung never claimed to be perfect. He struggled. He had affairs. He wrestled with his shadow his entire life. But he did the work. He faced himself. And in doing so, he became one of the most influential thinkers in human history. You don't need to be Jung, but you can apply what he discovered. Start here. Notice where you're leaking energy, not just sexually, though that's part of it. Where are you scattering attention? Where are you craving without building? Where are you reacting instead of responding? Then redirect. Take that energy and pour it into something real. A project, a skill, a relationship, a vision. Not to distract yourself, but to transform the energy into its higher form. Jung believed that every human has the capacity for this transformation. He called it the alchemical process, turning lead into gold, turning base desire into refined purpose. And when you do that, when you rise above lust, the world doesn't just notice, it aligns, doors open, people appear, opportunities emerge, not because you've earned cosmic favor, but because you've stopped contradicting yourself energetically. You've become coherent, and coherence is magnetic. Toward the end of his life, Jung issued a warning. He said that modern civilization is facing a crisis of meaning. People are disconnected from their inner depths. They're overstimulated, over-distracted, and under-integrated. And he predicted, those who learn to transmute their energy, those who rise above compulsion and into consciousness, will be the ones who lead humanity forward, not through force, through presence. He believed the next evolution of human consciousness depends on individuals willing to do this inner work, to face their shadow, to integrate their desires, to become whole. You're not just doing this for yourself. You're doing it for everyone your life touches. Because when you're no longer fragmented, you stop fragmenting others. When you're no longer leaking, you stop draining. When you're aligned, you become a source. and the world desperately needs sources right now. Carl Jung spent his life proving this isn't mystical thinking, it's psychological fact. When you rise above lust, the world aligns with you, not because you've become perfect, because you've become whole. And wholeness is the rarest frequency in a fragmented world.